The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Whitting.
What role do dreams play in the awakening of our consciousness? Can an incidental dream stay with the dreamer long enough to change their life's direction? And can we benefit from unremembered NDEs? Welcome to NDE Radio, brought to you by the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I'm your host, Lee Whitting. Today's guest on NDE Radio is Gloria Oelman, who lives in Adelaide, Australia, where right now it's just about 2:30 in the morning, so we thank her for staying up for this. In her bio, Gloria writes, I grew up in the 1950s in a mining town in the outback of Australia. Family life was chaotic and unstable as her father had done a disappearing act, and her mother was often hospitalized with nervous breakdowns. Some of our carers were angels, some were devils. Gloria, welcome to NDE Radio.
Hello, Lee. Nice to be here.
It's great that you would stay up so late to be part of the show. I'd like to jump right into a vision you had described to me briefly. That you had while you were meditating. You had a vision of Jesus, and this would be particularly meaningful, I would think, because you had been an atheist.
I had, as a child, I was quite religious, but I had given it up pretty much in my mid-teens, and was very much an atheist at that point. There was no belief in an afterlife, certainly no belief in a God. And my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer, pancreatic cancer, in 1996, and he was 47. And he took up meditation because there was no medical intervention that he could do. And I went along with him as moral support. And initially I had a vision of my mother, who appeared to me, and she said, you don't need to be here, Gloria, you're needed back there. I had been having a lot of suicidal thoughts, just thoughts, I wasn't going to do anything. But I had, with that meditation, an incredible peace had come over me, which I had not really ever experienced in my life as far as I could remember. So that was the first incident, and a couple of weeks after that, I was doing a meditation which was basically count down from 10 to 0, see the 0 expand, walk through, like see yourself walk through, and then find yourself in a peaceful setting of, whatever appealed to you. And I did that, and I saw myself, it was like watching a movie. I saw myself sitting on a bench, and Jesus appeared in front of me. And he said, I am the way, the truth and the light. Ask and you will receive, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened. And with that, I saw a facade with a door ajar, and I walked in through this doorway, and I just found myself in a place of light. It wasn't bright, it was like a light fog, but there were no objects within this space. And I kind of danced around freeform like a child, and then I sat down in a meditation position, and after some time I got up and I walked out, and as I did, the light was attached to me at the back. So it kind of was attached at the back of the nape of my neck right down to my heels, my ankles, and I was pulling it with me. And as I walked, this vibration just ripped through my body, and it felt kind of like it came from outside of me and entered into my body. It didn't feel like an internal thing. And with that, I kind of came a little bit out of the meditation, but because I had more or less trained myself to count back up, I stayed with that. And then I got to this other level where I saw myself at a bus stop Sounds really weird. And a bus came along and I got on the bus, and then this man sat alongside me who would later appear in my dreams quite often, and I refer to him as my Jesus figure because he didn't really look like the historical Jesus as the vision had, the figure in the vision had. And he said to me, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm just along for the ride." And that was it. And I was just very happy. And I then came out of the meditation, but I was really quite deeply disturbed by that. And I felt almost embarrassed. And the only way I can explain that is that I kind of felt like I'd been sprung, as though I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't have. It was just that kind of feeling. And I sat there for a while. I was by myself at this stage. I was in the house on my own. And I sat there and I thought, I better write this down. You know, I'm not going to believe it or something anyway. So with that, I got up and put the phone back on the hook because I'd taken it off to meditate. And before I had a chance to write it down, the phone rang. And it was my sister-in-law, Roger's sister, from America, calling. And she was a missionary. She was still a missionary. She had been a missionary in Peru some years before. And immediately I thought, Sylvia's got something to do with this, you know, like I thought, you know, she's been doing something. But anyway, I didn't say anything to her about it at the time. But later on, after my husband died, she had a recurrence of the breast cancer that she had had. And, when it came time that it looked like she was going to die, I thought, well, I'll tell her about it and I'll ask her, you know, like, did you have anything to do with this? Anyway, I did tell her and she hadn't heard of anything like that. And she said, but she was always praying for us to come to Jesus. So, you know, whether those prayers had an effect or not, I don't know. So that was the initial experience. But what happened after that was that I had a lot of electrical activity within my body. I would have, sort of like electrical spikes in my head that would happen. I had what I would call a third eye opening kind of thing. It was almost like a silent explosion in my forehead. I had that kind of thing in my chest, and I would get these what I call tingles, and they would be very, very strong and often would start in the top of my head, and often would just go right through my body. And so all this sort of stuff was happening. But then the dreams started after my husband died. So he did live for about 6 months after that. But it was almost the minute he died that the dreams just opened up, and I had never remembered dreams before. I'd perhaps remembered a couple of dreams throughout my whole life.
Do you think your husband had a hand in activating your dream state?
Well, I mean, anything's possible. There was an incident during the time that he was sick. A friend of ours came up one day and they were having a discussion about whether or not there was life after death, because Roger had believed pretty much as I did. You know, we were both of a single mind as far as any afterlife or spiritual aspect or anything. But this friend had a mother and a sister who had both passed, and they had been in the spiritualist church their whole life. And Nigel said to Roger, "Oh, I don't think so. You know, if anybody was going to get through to me, it would be them, and I've not heard anything." So Roger said to him, well, if I survive and there's a way, I'll try and get through to you. And they both laughed about it. You know, they thought this was a joke. But perhaps about 3 weeks after Roger died, I'm guessing because I didn't keep a note of this, Nigel and his wife came to my place, and I'd been telling them about my dreams at that stage. And Sheila said, Nigel, tell Gloria about your dream. Anyway, Nigel said that he was in bed and Roger came through the wall behind him, and Nigel looked at him and said, Roger, what are you doing here? You're dead. Oh, no, he didn't. No, he said, what are you doing here? You said you would get back to me if you could. And Roger said to him, this is how it's done in dreams. So I have to wonder. But lots of things happened. Lots of things fell into place for me. It was a very difficult time. I had to move house, had businesses, and selling property, and I had to close my square dance club, and there's a whole lot of things that happened that I had to sort out.
Of course. Mm-hmm. One of the things you also mentioned to me was the fact that you think you might have had near-death experiences at least twice when you were younger, but you don't remember the details of it.
Yeah, well, there's probably, if I think about it, there are probably about 4 incidents throughout my life. One particularly powerful one was as a 12-year-old, I was raped by an uncle. We were, my sister and I were living with him. He was our guardian at the time. And the abuse had been going on for a long time, but there had been no violence. And this particular time, what happened was that basically I blacked out with the pain. So how shall I put this? I don't recall what happened. All I remember is being on the bed, feeling this intense pain and shock, and just blacking out. And it must have been probably for about 10, 15 minutes, I would think. And when I came to, it was like my consciousness was split 3 ways. It was like I could see my face up in the ceiling in the corner of the room, and that was looking at me. But it was also like I had this awareness of the whole scene at the same time. And it was almost like there was some kind of telepathic communication that was going on between this consciousness that was up in the corner of the room, which actually felt like me, it still felt like me, and the me that was on the bed, and also this other kind of awareness that didn't really feel like me. But it felt like at that time that I was being given information or explanation or something, and because I don't have any memory of it, it's difficult for me to explain that. So it's more or less a feeling. I had a similar experience when I had a car accident when I was 23, so that's about 11 years afterwards, where I hit the windscreen and was knocked unconscious. And I had that same sense that when I came to, as though I had been somewhere else, and that I was kind of like in a meeting. I was kind of like having a meeting with somebody or with some entities or something. And again, because I don't have any recall of it, it's more or less a feeling. But it's something that I've wondered about because of this situation with the dreams, where I'd never recalled my dreams throughout my life, and then suddenly the dream life opened up, and I thought, well, perhaps that happens with near-death experiences too. You know, do people have near-death experiences that they don't remember?
Oh, yes, I think this happens quite a lot because, and perhaps some of it is, at least in the hospital, is accountable for by the fact that many of the drugs they use these days limit short-term memory. They used to use a drug called ketamine, which stimulated visions and what doctors called hallucinations, but it made the doctors very uncomfortable to hear stories about what people saw from the other side. So they've gone to something that actually suppresses short-term memory now. But that's outside of your experience. I was wondering, with your 12-year-old experience, would that third consciousness that clearly you had an out-of-body experience, I would say. It's interesting that there was a communication link between your body's consciousness and your soul's consciousness, but perhaps the third entity was some sort of what people might call a guardian angel or some spirit that was trying to mitigate some of the pain of the circumstances.
That's my feeling, that it was something other than me. And it certainly was a benevolent feeling. And, you know, I've often looked back on that whole situation and wondered how I got through it, because I couldn't tell anybody, and I didn't tell anybody for another 18 years. And I only did then because I'd been having panic attacks, and they just kept escalating to the point where I really had to get help, and I hadn't connected the panic attacks with that situation. But you know, if you think about like how would a 12-year-old child with no support and not being able to talk about it and you know, having to deal with it on their own, I would think that it's an impossibility, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, even though I've been through it and I know that it's a possibility, but I would think that there would have to be something from beyond, I would think, that's supporting through that.
Now, in the dreams that were activated after your husband died, do you have visions of the other side? What's the nature of those dreams? Tell us a little about that.
Well, one of the dreams I had was from Roger. Roger appeared to me, and I didn't have a clear memory of a dream. It felt like it could have been an actual visit. So I'm not even sure if I was in the dream state with this one, but I just woke up with this kind of idea in my head that he wanted me to speak to his mother because she wasn't letting go of him. And I didn't want to speak to my mother-in-law because we weren't really on great terms, and also the nature of the communication, but it wouldn't leave me alone. And so eventually I did, and I rang her, and she was fine with it. You know, she wasn't fazed at all. And she said to me, well, whenever I think of him, I'm telling him off. And I said, well, you know, perhaps that's the problem. And she said, well, what could I do? And anyway, in the end, she said, well, when I go to sleep, I'll ask him if he's got anything to say to me, and you know, I'm listening. And just as I was about to put the phone down, she just suddenly blurted out, well, isn't that typical? He would come and see you if he's got anything to say. Why didn't he come to see me directly? And I was a bit taken aback by that. And I thought, well, you know, like it could be something to do with the fact that you're not very open about this communication. But anyway, I put the phone down and I'm sitting there just mulling over the conversation in my mind. And then suddenly this voice said, I've tried to, and she won't let me in. And I said, is that you, Roger? You know, like feeling quite sheepish. And with that, this intense feeling started up in the top of my head, and then it kind of just went whoosh right through my body, right down to the floor. And then it was almost like the air was sucked out of the room. It was a really weird feeling. But that's what it felt like. And so that was more or less it. But it was so physical, like I could not ignore it. It wasn't a product of my imagination. It felt real. So with that, I rang my mother-in-law up again and told her what happened. So she said, she would just try her best and speak to him. And I did speak to her from time to time after that, but she said there was nothing to report, and eventually, the subject was dropped. So that was one thing. But that was 2.5 years after he died, and that convinced me then that something was going on, because I really was very, very skeptical, and it's fear. I can see that now, because it just opens up so many questions. It's much easier to believe that life just ends in nothing. You don't have to look any further then. You don't have to answer any awkward questions. So, so that was that dream. And
when you had the vision of Jesus, that wasn't, you weren't completely convinced even by that there was an afterlife then?
No, not at all. I'm a hard nut to crack, but again, it's fear. It really, I felt I had a lot to answer for, and it's ridiculous to even say that, but that was the feeling that I had. I had a lot of guilt and shame over the childhood stuff, and it doesn't matter how much you tell a child that it's not their fault. The child still feels at fault, and I think somehow at a soul level there's something else going on. I'm not quite sure how to put that without getting into some really difficult conversation. These difficult relationships that we have do seem to have a component of some form of connection, put it that way.
So do you think that atheism in part comes from people's fear of being judged after they die? That's one of the reasons they refuse to even believe in the possibility?
Well, that's certainly my experience. It was a defense. It's a defense. That's how I experienced it for myself. And certainly my husband as well, I could see that with him. And when I started to really accept that consciousness is primary, whereas, like in the past I had thought, like the material scientific viewpoint is that matter is primary, consciousness is a product of matter, whereas now I've completely reversed that, and it's hard for me to even imagine that I ever thought that way before. Mm-hmm. But it certainly is a defense, because it opens up a lot of questions when you think that there is consciousness is producing this world. You have to come to terms with the state of the world and the way people, particularly human beings, are. You have to come to some kind of explanation of the nature of evil and that, all the terrible things that go on. So, if you think that there is a God and that God has created the world, then you have to think that God has created all this evil. So you have to wrestle with that whole question. And it's easier not to.
Yes.
It's been a very, very difficult 18 years for me to try and, sort all this stuff through in my mind.
The nature of God, the nature of free will, why evil should exist when only there's only one creator and he's supposedly all good. Yes, these are the big theological questions that have haunted mankind for forever.
Yeah. Well, I have come to a satisfactory, I won't say explanation because I don't think it can be explained, but an understanding for myself that the nature of this consciousness that produces the whole of existence is love. The basis is love. And certainly the near-death experience literature has helped me enormously with that. And I think, if you don't feel love for yourself, within yourself, which I haven't in my life, then it's very difficult to think that, you have been created by love. So it's, it's a lot of sorting through all the psychological stuff, working through your issues and all of that. Mm.
Of course. But that's one of the amazing things about the near-death experience reports that we deal with on this radio show, for instance, all the time, because it does give you that basis of love that when people cross over and go into the light, that's all they can talk about is the love and forgiveness that they feel. And so it may be the next evolutionary step in how we understand what we used to deal with in religion. This may be a consciousness-raising thing that is just inevitably going to happen to everybody. And I hope it happens soon, because otherwise we're not going to be able to save the world as it is.
Well, there is certainly
the beauty of the world.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of spontaneous awakenings going on. I mean, mine is just one. So if that can happen to me, I'm sure it's happening to a lot of people.
Well, listen, I am sure people are going to want to learn more about you, and if you would tell folks how they can pick up on your blog.
Well, my blog is called dreammysteries.net, and Dream Mysteries is one word with just one M in the middle. So it's not Dream Mysteries, it's Dream Mysteries, all one word, .net.
Okay. And is there a way that people could leave a message for you there, or if they wanted to talk to you or communicate with you?
Yes. There's a email thingy there that goes to me. Yeah. I think on the comments something. Yeah, but they'll find it. Now
we have perhaps less than a minute, but perhaps you could mention your interest in Jung.
Oh, Carl Jung. Well, I was led very synchronistically to the Jung Society. I heard from 3 different people who didn't know each other about the Jung Society, and I went along. This was soon after my husband died as well. And once a month they have a meeting, and I would go there and I would sit and I would not understand anything that was said, but something kept compelling me. And basically, Carl Jung's psychology is a spiritual psychology. That's the way I explain it. And so the Jungian psychology really helped me a lot.
A lot of that, of course, came out of his own near-death experience, which he wrote about, which is fascinating.
Yes.
Gloria, I'm afraid we're out of time for today. I want to thank you so much for... Go ahead.
Yes, it was lovely to talk to you.
And for you to stay up until so late in Adelaide, I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
But I want to thank our guest, Gloria Oelman, for describing the importance of dreams and visions and how they can enlighten your life. And if you'd like to listen again to this or any of our past shows, just go to our website at nderadio.org. And for more information about the work of IANDS, check out their website, iands.org. And tune in next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, for more NDE Radio. This is Lee Whitting saying thanks for listening.